We've had our podcast for 7 years now. Crazy, I know. So when we decided to start Clutch Defense, it was kind of scary. There was a lot of anxiety. Will people like it? Will anyone buy it? How do you run all the behind the scenes of a new brand? Well, that's where Shopify comes in. Shopify is the commerce platform behind millions of businesses around the world and 10% of all e-commerce in the United States. It makes building a store super easy with ready-to-use templates, built-in tools to create email and social campaigns, and everything you need in one place, from inventory to payments to analytics. And that iconic Shop Pay button, that's why Shopify has the best converting checkout on the planet, meaning fewer abandoned carts and more sales. So it's time to turn those what ifs into with Shopify today. Sign up for $1 per month trial. Go to shopify.com/wifeofcrime1. That's shopify.com/wifeofcrime1.
This podcast is an unscripted, unedited conversation about true crime. We take the cases very seriously, but I don't take myself seriously at all, and neither should you. Welcome to Wife of Crime.
So, Russ, last week I gave you an overview of the case of Robert Wone. But this week we are going detail by detail, because what we will come to find is that the devil is in the details in this case. This case feels like a maze. Every time you feel like you're getting closer to figuring it out, something gets thrown in that takes you in a whole other direction. This is part 2 of the murder of Robert Wone. Everyone, welcome back to Wife of Crime, a true crime podcast where I tell my husband Russ true crime stories and he reacts to them.
What up, folks? It's your boy Russ, a.k.a. Bring the Summer Back, a.k.a. Stop Raining, a.k.a. I'm the youngest person to buy readers in the world.
I definitely don't think you're the youngest.
29? Who buys readers at 29?
Yeah.
29?
Yeah, you're 29.
Guys are normally good at 29.
True. You are. If you are allegedly 29.
And 29 and feeling fine.
Then you are the youngest reader purchaser.
Yes.
Some people really love that in the comments. They were commenting about you buying readers, and somebody said that they were surprised you didn't say that you looked at your DICK.
Oh, I saw that. And then I responded to him. I said, nah, I'm going to put those on Jess. Or a girl. I forgot whether it was a man or woman, but whatever.
Yeah, I don't know if it was a guy or a girl that commented that. But
I was funny. Like, yeah, no, I'll put them on Jess. Because then it'll look bigger to you.
It's funny.
Yo, men, we just found a life hack.
There you go.
Get your girl some readers. It makes everything look bigger.
It does.
But then yeah, I'm not going to go any further.
Okay. Well, last week we talked about Captain Kirk, right? The principal at the school who tackled the school shooter.
The fucking legend.
Captain
Took
Kirk.
a shot and everything.
Kirk Moore got shot. He tackled the school shooter. It was an amazing story. And then it got even more amazing because over the course of the week, they had their prom and they crowned him the prom king.
Yup.
That is the most amazing thing I've ever heard. I love it.
He was moving good for someone who got shot, too.
Yeah, he was.
I wish he would have, like I said last week, I wish he would have pulled that gun off that guy and shot his ass.
Well, I'm just glad that he saved everybody. And I'm glad that everyone gave him the recognition he deserved. And he got crowned with a king crown. And it was amazing.
You know he's a celebrity wherever he goes right now in his, area.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
If you're part of his community, if he goes to any of your restaurants again and you make him pay for food, you're doing yourself a disservice.
Yeah.
You should be flattered that he came to your establishment.
Yeah.
This man should not pay for food.
He should not.
Ever again.
Pay for his dinners, for sure. That's so sweet. I love that they crowned him the prom king. I thought that was so cool.
Yeah, that was dope. Celebrate good people. We have so much focus on the negativity nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
Can't ignore the negative because someone has to complain on the internet.
Well, a bunch of our listeners are sending us messages all about the singer David, because way back on a Start Spreading the News episode, I think last year, we talked about that a girl named Celeste Rivas Hernandez, her body was found in an impounded Tesla.
Yeah, he's like an artist. This was his Tesla.
And it was his Tesla. And then he claimed he didn't know anything about it, whatever.
And this has been months.
Yes.
It might have been a year. Like,
Oh,
it's been a long time. He hasn't been arrested.
Mm-hmm. He was not arrested, but finally they did arrest him this week and charged him with first-degree murder of Celeste Rivas Hernandez. She was only 14
Hashtag
years.
fuck Dave. One of the crazy things that I saw today while strolling through my news source, which is very reputable, Instagram, and he has child porn in his phone, like a lot.
What?
Yeah.
That is crazy.
Yeah, so
I mean, it's not surprising. She was only 14.
I'm starting to feel like these celebrities that are doing all this and the crazy sexual stuff, like with Diddy, I think what happens is they can have anyone they want, or like a lot of people, or sex with beautiful people whenever they want, that they lose the ability to get off unless they're doing something crazy.
Yeah, maybe.
Like they've done everything already.
I feel like we could definitely dive into the psychology of that. Like people who are multimillionaire to billionaires, they have everything they could ever want and have access to everything. And it's like they just get worse and worse and worse.
Yeah, because they just keep getting away with more and more. So now to give them that thrill, they always keep stepping it up. Not all of them. Some of you are probably dope.
Yeah. Yeah, true.
And if any of you are billionaires listening here, hit me up in my DM. I will give you my phone number. Just kidding.
You wouldn't give a billionaire they could change our lives. You wouldn't give them your phone number?
Depends on if they're corny or not.
Oh, okay.
I don't fuck with corny
So you
people.
have stipulations. Even if they're a billionaire, if they're corny, it could blow up our podcast. It could change our lives. We could never have to work again. We could end up on Netflix. It could be completely amazing. But if they're corny, you're not associating.
Yeah, you can't buy me. Money, you could buy anything, but you can't buy swag.
Well, I guess Russ will never be a sellout.
Nah.
At least you know that.
I don't know. It depends on what they have to offer. I ain't just going to be anyone's friend because they got money.
Yeah, that's true.
You can't. This is priceless, baby. You lucky.
Thank you. Well, it's good news in that case. Celeste Hernandez's family actually made a statement, and it's the first time they've spoken publicly at all about this. And they just thanked the LA Police Department and the district attorney's office. And they wanted to thank all the people in their community for their support, because I think so many people were just like, why is this taking so long? She was found dismembered in his car. And she was a known associate, like a known friend of his, known girlfriend of his.
At 14.
At 14 years old. Like, why is this taking so long? And so many people were pushing. And I think that that's just speaks to when these cases get highly publicized, it's important for communities to come together and push the police department and put pressure on these police departments to figure this shit out.
I'm so surprised. People have been arrested and put on trial for way less than having the body chopped up in the car.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? And I found out today she died from being stabbed.
Really?
Yeah. They said like puncture or I forgot what word they used, but I assumed it was stabbed.
That's sad. That's really sad.
Yeah.
Well, I'm glad that they are finally moving that case along.
Now, what could he even say to why she's in his car? You know what I mean?
I don't know. His defense attorney will come up with something.
I don't even know who this dude is.
Yeah, I never listened to him either. I didn't even know who he was until the case came up. Maybe because we're old. I don't know.
Or maybe he didn't come across my Spotify because he's a bitch.
Maybe. I mean, Russ only listens to gangster rap.
That's not true.
No, I'm kidding.
Or I'm a big R&B dude.
He did. No, he listens to R&B and soul. A lot of R&B and soul music, which I found, okay, when you meet Russ in person, when I first met him, he was a lot younger.
That's true. I was
29 years old when I met you.
We just met.
He was 29. He's very much a Bronx guy. Like you come across, especially back then when you were younger, you come across as like this Bronx dude. And so for me, the first time I ever heard you listen to R&B, I was just like, really shocked by it. I don't know why. I was just really surprised.
She was like, "Where's your bedroom?"
I was really surprised by it. But yeah, you listen to a lot of R&B. You're a big R&B fan.
Yeah.
And he listens to a lot of soul music, and he listens to some like
some metal.
Rock.
I have like some Godsmack songs I like.
Yeah, you listen to some like heavy metal.
Some like Metallica.
And then rap pretty much is what makes up the rest of your music taste. So we're back with part 2. And I have to say, everybody gave you a lot of hate. Okay, you got a lot of hate for making everybody wait.
Listen, good things are worth waiting for. If it was easy to write all these stories and stuff, I ain't gonna brag.
Yes, he got a lot of hate, but I will say I'm gonna flip it. And I'm actually going to say I'm glad he made us wait. I normally don't like when Russ makes me wait to put out episodes, because when him and I record and I rush to get it edited and like hurry up to try to get it out, I get really excited to put it out. It's like I'm putting this out for you guys, and it's like I made this little thing for you, and I'm super excited to get it out to everybody. And when he makes me wait, I get really annoyed. But in this case, I'm actually glad that he made us wait, because I had the whole second episode written. However, after I had it all written, because I had gone with multiple sources, I've been hyperfixated on this case for weeks, okay? And when I have a hyperfixation, I go really, really hard, right? So one of our listeners commented about a podcast called The Consult. And The Consult is a podcast that is a few retired FBI profilers. All right.
Kind of like me.
Kind of like you.
I'm retired. I come on here and profile a little bit.
Yeah.
Go do some other stuff.
Well, they worked in the behavioral analyst unit. And so their podcast, definitely check it out. I really love their series on this case. So I'm sure all the other cases that they cover are really well done. And essentially, they use all of their experiences from years of being FBI agents to break down cases and talk through them and then give their analysis of it. And this case in particular, they devoted 8 episodes to.
Dang.
And I didn't know about this podcast until one of our listeners commented. So I went and listened to their 8-part series and added tons more detail, okay, than I already had. So even though we had to wait, you're actually going to get way better coverage and way more detail and just a lot more from me because I added so much more. So actually this time making us wait works out. So here we go. Are you ready?
Buckle up.
There are some cases where you can step back at the end and at least make it make sense. Maybe you don't have every single detail, but the pieces fit well enough that you can see the picture. You understand how it happened. And more importantly, you understand why. This is not one of those cases. Because with this one, every time you think you're getting close, something shifts. A detail doesn't line up. A timeline breaks. A piece that should fit just doesn't. And the more you sit with it, the more it starts to feel like you're not solving a puzzle. You're trying to force pieces together that were never meant to go in the same place. So, just to ground us before we go any further, let's do a brief overview of part 1. If you have not listened to part 1, go back and listen to part 1, because we talked through an overview of the case. And in this episode, we are dissecting detail by detail. Okay?
I'm ready.
Robert Wone, and I want to say real quick, his name is spelled W-O-N-E, Wone. So some podcasts pronounce it as Wone, but in Chinese, it's pronounced Wone. Okay?
Speaking of China, they executed 3 child molesters this week.
Wow.
Take notes, America.
Yeah, definitely.
Let's deter these motherfuckers.
Robert Wone was a successful attorney, newly working as the general counsel for Radio Free Asia. And by all accounts, he lived a very stable and structured life with his wife, Kathy. On the night of August 2nd, after a late meeting with colleagues, he went to stay at the Washington, D.C. home of his very good friend, Joe Price, where Price lived with his partner, Victor Zaborski, a.k.a. his husband, and their friend, a.k.a. Joe's boyfriend, Dylan Ward. It wasn't random. Robert had planned this in advance, okay? I want to make that clear. He planned it in advance. He actually planned this about a week or two beforehand. He texted two separate people asking if he could spend the night at their house, and the other person didn't get back to him, but Joe Price did. He arrived a little after 10:30, and he spent a short time downstairs in the kitchen talking with the men, and then went upstairs to the guest room. Less than an hour later, at 11:49 p.m., a 911 call was made from inside the home, and we listened to that 911 call last week.
Oh, yeah.
The men said that an intruder came through the back door and made his way upstairs, stabbed Robert multiple times in the chest and the abdomen, and then disappeared without ever being seen.
That's right. I forgot he was killed by a ninja.
Yeah.
That's basically what they're saying. Like,
Yeah.
someone snuck in the house super quietly, stabbed the man up quietly while they're in the apartment or house with him.
When police and EMS arrive on scene, they find Robert lying in the guest room, unresponsive, with 3 stab wounds, but almost immediately, things don't line up. There are no signs of forced entry, no clear evidence of a struggle, no defensive wounds, and remember, I told you, hardly any blood.
And the whole house was made up, like they made the beds and...
Yeah, the house was in pristine shape.
But, don't kill me, but I always assume that's how gay people's houses are.
Well,
like, maybe they didn't do anything.
No, so this house was always pristine.
That's what I'm saying. Maybe they didn't clean up because the place was always clean.
It is very clean, and that's something we'll talk about a little later. But these men lived a very clean and organized life in their home.
Yeah, they were 2 baddies.
So there were 3 of them, remember?
3 baddies.
So there was pretty much no blood. The scene was totally clean. There was no disarray. And the behavior from the men didn't match the situation. The EMTs and medics and police on scene felt like the men weren't acting appropriate for what this scene would have called for. As the investigation unfolds, there are more questions than answers. The autopsy confirms the stab wounds were the cause of death, but also reveals some findings that really complicate this whole narrative. There are no defensive injuries. There is evidence of sexual activity and toxicology results that come back completely negative. The 3 men maintain the same story, that it was an unknown intruder. So that's where we left off, right? I gave you kind of an overview of the case last week, and now we're going to kind of go through step by step and talk through everything, and I'm going to reveal some more details. And we're going to really talk through all the things. Now, I told you last week that the 3 men were in a polyamorous relationship, right? Victor and Joe were husbands, and they brought Dylan into the relationship, and they were considered a throuple, right? But Victor and Dylan didn't have a sexual relationship. So essentially, you have Joe and Victor who are married, and then Joe felt like his sexual needs weren't being met because he is into BDSM, sadomasochism. He's into like some heavy BDSM. Okay.
He wanted someone to tear that ass up.
Okay. So he was into all that, and Victor wasn't. Him and Victor, their sex life wasn't like that. So what he did was he decided to bring Dylan into the scenario. And Victor, loving Joe, was like, okay, we can bring a third person in. But Victor and Dylan didn't have sex with each other. It was only Joe and Dylan. So now you have Joe, who is kind of the center of this whole family, this whole relationship. So that's the dynamic in this house that Robert's walking into. And Robert had been really good friends with Joe for years, right? I told you about that. They met in college. They were really good friends. And he knew that Joe and Victor were married, and Joe and Victor were really good friends with Robert and his wife, Kathy. So this is all known, but he's walking into this household with this very specific dynamic between these three men.
Mhm.
And Robert, being friends with Joe, he doesn't necessarily know or understand the ins and outs of this throuple relationship. Okay? And that's kind of where we left off last week.
One of the things that stuck out to me last week was he was there for such a short time and got killed. How long was he there? I forgot, an hour or two?
A little over an hour. He got there at 10:30, and the 911 call was made at 11:49.
Yeah.
So, I mean, it's a very tight timeline.
Yeah, he got something happened. It escalated rather quickly.
Mm-hmm. It was a very tight timeline. So before we go any further, I want to take a step back and talk about Robert. Because in a case like this, where things get very confusing, where details start to feel overwhelming, it's really easy to lose sight of the person at the center of it. And Robert Wone had a very full life, and he lived a very intentional life. He was born in New York City in 1974, and he was the oldest of two sons, and he was raised in a fourth-generation Chinese-American family. But he had deep roots with his community. He grew up in Brooklyn, and he went to an all-boys Catholic school. And even at a young age, he stood out, not just because he was incredibly smart, academically, but the way he was in the world and the way he treated the people around him. He was very generous, very sweet. He always was the kid that is helping the less fortunate kids out in his class. He's the kid that is taking up for the kid who's getting bullied.
This is Robert.
Yeah.
Okay, just confirming because I'm terrible with names.
So Robert was not just smart, but he was caring and generous and sweet. And everybody in his life who knew him said this, okay? Everybody talked about it. He went to the College of William and Mary, and he got a full scholarship. And he majored in public policy because he wanted to give back to his community. When he became a lawyer, he took on pro bono cases for Chinese people in his community because he wanted to give back.
Yeah, he's probably helping immigrants out. Maybe they ain't got the money or something.
Yeah, he was such a good dude. Nice. While he was in college, he was the head of this student-led group, and their whole entire purpose was to go on the campus and do good deeds for other people. And he was in charge of this group. He was just such a nice person.
I don't know nobody like that.
He was active in honor societies, and he graduated in 1996 and received an award for his character throughout his whole college career. So he went to law school at the University of Pennsylvania, and he stayed really active in the advocacy work that he was doing. And he ended up moving to Washington, D.C. and worked for Covington and Burling. He did real estate law there.
Okay.
He then took a position for Radio Free Asia as their general counsel, but it was actually a downgrade from his other position in real estate because he made a lot of money in the real estate firm, but
it's not all about money for everyone.
It's not all about money for him.
A billionaire can't buy me, we found out today.
Yeah, we did. It's not all about money for him. He wanted to give back to his community, and this Radio Free Asia is a public radio that services Asian communities. And so he decided to downgrade his career a little bit. He took less money, and it was a lower position so that he could work for this nonprofit.
Good for him.
But above all that, there's also his wife, Kathy. So Robert met Catherine Yu at a conference in Philadelphia in 2002, and they were long distance for a while. They would fly back and forth between DC and Chicago on weekends to see each other. But then quickly, they'd only been together about a year, and this was kind of a whirlwind romance. So he proposed to her in 2003, and they were married that year. They just knew that they were meant to be together. Everything about their relationship, from what people describe, just feels steady, supportive, grounded, and intentional. They were both attorneys, and they were involved in their community. They went to church together, and they built a life that, from the outside, looked solid. The kind of life where you know what your next step is, where things make sense. At the time of his death, Robert was on the verge of another milestone. He was about to be sworn in as the president of the Asian Pacific American Bar Association in D.C. And that just showed how much he mattered to
He was doing a
the
lot
Asian
of stuff.
community. Yeah.
He's very active.
Very
person.
respected, too.
Yeah. And it doesn't sound like he was doing it like, look at me.
No, he wasn't. He didn't need the recognition.
Mm-hmm.
He wasn't someone who lived on the edge. He didn't take a lot of risks, okay? He's not someone that you'd expect to end up in a situation like this, which is why what happens next just feels so out of place. So let's slow down, and we're going to walk through the night that this happened, the night of, and what happened inside that house. Robert leaves his office and calls Joe Price at 10:24. Okay, his phone records from his BlackBerry show that he called Joe and told him, I'm on the way over.
Was it walking distance?
So he had to take the metro, like 1 or 2 stops, and then he walked a couple blocks.
No.
So it didn't take him very long. He called him at 10:24 and he got there at 10:30. So he arrives at Joe's house at around 10:30, maybe a few minutes after. When he gets there, Dylan Ward opens the door to let him in. And eventually, Joe comes downstairs. But Victor...
And he's like, hey, Joe. if you don't know the song, you don't know the song. It's Hendrix.
Victor stays upstairs. So the three of them spend a short time in the kitchen, talking. Seems pretty ordinary. They give Robert a glass of water. They catch up really briefly, in just a few minutes. And then they show him to the guest room.
Now, this is what they said they did.
Yes. This is according to the men in the home. This is what happened.
So now what I'm interested in is finding out the amount of time they said they didn't see him until they called 911. Like,
the amount of time
I showed him his room and we went into our rooms.
Yeah.
Like, okay, so around when did that happen? Now that means was he only alone for 10 minutes?
No, according to their timeline, they took him upstairs and showed him the guest room a little after 10:30. Like, he comes in at 10:30, they give him a glass of water, they talk in the kitchen for just a few minutes. So maybe 10:45, 10:50, they take him upstairs and show him where the guest room is. And then they all go their separate ways.
Okay.
So according to them, everyone separates. And this all happens pretty quickly. By around 11 o'clock, they say they've all gone to their respective rooms for the night to go to sleep.
And so that the last time they saw him, they're saying is 11.
Yeah.
So he got killed between 11 and 11:30-ish?
Well, he made the call at 11:49.
11:49. Okay, so they didn't see him for 49 minutes is what they're saying.
Yes. Robert tells them he's going to go take a shower. And Dylan Ward tells police that he hears the shower running from down the hall. Joe and Victor are upstairs, and they eventually turn the TV off and go to sleep around 11:05 or 11:10. Okay, that's according to them. And then we get one of the last clear timestamps from Robert himself, because at 11:05 and 11:07, he drafts 2 emails from his BlackBerry. One to Kathy saying, I just showered, I'm about to go to sleep. And another one confirming plans for the next day. But these emails are never sent, so they go into his draft folder. So that tells you something must have happened to him around 11:07 because he drafted this email to his wife, hey, I just took a shower, I'm about to go to bed, and then never sent it. Unfortunately, his BlackBerry, they took it into evidence for a very short time, but then it was wiped, never properly analyzed, and so they lost whatever else might have been in there. They went through his emails.
How was it wiped?
So the BlackBerry belonged to his company that he worked for. And so the police took it into evidence. They went through his emails. They went through text messages. This is a BlackBerry. So at the time, it's not like you're not texting like we do now.
Yeah, it's kind of like an Android if you for the iPhone users. BlackBerry's like...
No, it wasn't. I had a BlackBerry. It's way less advanced than an Android. Shut up.
No, I'm saying that's how Androids are now.
Anyway, so, he did emails and, he might have had a few messages on there. They went through them, but then they gave the phone back to the company.
Why didn't they just... Wait, cops are always allowed to keep shit as evidence.
They didn't, though. They looked at it. They looked through it.
They said we got it
They
all.
got the evidence they thought they needed. And then they just gave the phone back to the company. And then some other employee ended up with it later, probably. So that's all we know about what was on his phone. Sometime after that, in the next 10 or so minutes, their next door neighbor hears a scream. Now remember, they're in a row home. So this neighbor shared a wall with them.
Yeah.
So she was actually a very reliable witness because she says she hears a scream in the 11 o'clock hour, and she knows it was that time because she was watching the 11 o'clock news.
A program.
But she can't say exactly what time in the 11 o'clock hour it was. She just knows that this famous news reporter, I forgot her name, who was always on at 11 o'clock, and she watched her every night, and she knew that that lady was on TV when she heard the scream.
I'm curious if she could just say, do you think it was in the beginning of the show? Because you could tell when the news just started or it's the middle. Like, do you have any idea how, like, did it just start or you were watching it for a few minutes already?
I think they tried, but she couldn't place an exact time. But this newscaster that was on every night at 11 was on between 11 and 11:30. So we know it's within that half hour. Okay, between 11 and 11:30. Inside the house, Joe and Victor say they're woken up by the sound of a door alarm chime. And that indicates that somebody just opened one of the doors. But they assume that it's their basement tenant because they had a woman living in their basement in like a basement apartment. Her name was Sarah Morgan, and she was really good friends with the three men. She was especially close with Victor. Her and Victor were really good friends. They assumed that Sarah was coming home for the night. Okay, so they heard the chime, and they were like, oh, it must be Sarah.
Yeah, because she walks that way every day.
They say they also hear some kind of noise. They described it as like a guttural grunt or yell. And then they heard a scream and ran downstairs.
Could be a noise, you know, when someone gets hit, they grunt or...
And then at 11:49, Victor calls 911. He's distraught. He's telling the dispatcher they believe someone broke into the house and that their house guest had been stabbed. And the call lasts a few minutes. If you want to hear it again, go back and listen in episode 1. I have it there. Paramedics arrive 7 minutes later. Okay, so they came pretty quick. He calls at 11:49. The paramedics arrive at 11:56. So that's really fast.
Good stuff.
Victor is outside when they get there, and he's wearing a white robe, and he starts screaming. And this is where we hear at the end of the phone call, he's like super distraught, and he's like, help us, and he's crying his eyes out. So as the medics start to make their way in the house and upstairs, I told you last week, they come across Dylan, who is also wearing a white robe, and he's standing in the hallway, and the medic, the head medic on the scene, asks Dylan, what's going on? And he doesn't say anything. He just gestures towards the guest room, turns around, walks in his bedroom, and closes the door.
This is literally like the game of Clue. Like they're playing characters and roles and shit.
It's crazy. Inside the room, Robert is found lying on the bed. He's lying on his back. I put a picture of the room, of the crime scene on our Instagram. You can check it out. You can see how pristine the bed looks. I mean, literally the covers are folded down. His body was lying on it, and there is very little blood. There is a little bit of blood on a hand towel laying on the nightstand next to him. There is blood on the quote-unquote murder weapon, which is a knife from their kitchen that is lying on the nightstand that has blood on it. And there is a couple drops of blood on the bed. But when someone is stabbed 3 times in the abdomen and chest and heart, you expect blood everywhere.
Well, that's what I was going to ask you. Are there certain parts of the body that if you got stabbed, you're just going to leak in instead of leak out?
We're going to get to that when we talk about the autopsy. Okay. So the room is not in disarray. Robert actually carried 2 wallets because the area of D.C. that he worked in was known for muggings. So he had
A giveaway wallet.
Yes, he had a wallet that he would give to muggers, and then he had his other wallet.
I worked with a bartender who always kept $20 in another pocket when she went back and forth to work in case she ever got robbed. Like, here's what I have.
Yeah, so that's what Robert did. So he had 2 wallets. He had his BlackBerry, and he had a very expensive watch. All of them were laying on a chair at the foot of the bed.
They even left the rollie.
Nothing was taken. Okay. Everything was neatly placed. Nothing appears to be disturbed the way you would expect from a violent attack. And so that's what the medic first noticed. Like, he walked in the room and they interviewed him extensively. And this is a paramedic who had been doing this for years. He had been on some crazy scenes. And he walked into the room. First of all, he's like taken aback by how Dylan's acting. Then he walks in the room and he's expecting a bloodbath.
Yeah.
And he sees this like pristine scene. And it
like a Dexter killing.
It really threw him off guard. Like he was shocked. But then he quickly switches his brain and he's like, okay, we got to figure out what's going on with Robert.
All right. I just have one thing I have to say. Do we explore enemies he has or a reason why people might want to kill him?
We'll talk about that in theories. Yeah.
Because does he have a job where someone might want to take him out? I mean, how high is he? Is he in a government? Like,
no, I just told you his job. He works for Radio Free Asia, a nonprofit.
I know, but the only other explanation for this is that he got assassinated. But if it's not that, someone in the house definitely killed him.
Yeah. The medics work on him for a short time, and they quickly move him to the ambulance and transport him to the hospital, and Robert is pronounced dead at 12:25. So let's break down what the medics do when they first encounter Robert, okay? Because now we're not just relying on what the men are saying. We're hearing what other people who work in this environment, who've encountered scenes like this, police and medics, we're relying now on what they say. So we're going to talk about what they say because for me, I want to hear what the trained professionals have to say. I don't want to hear what these 3 dudes are saying because I feel like they're lying anyway. Robert's lying on the bed, on his back, on top of the sheets. And he's wearing a t-shirt and shorts. And his wife confirmed later that that's what he usually slept in, was a t-shirt and shorts.
So he was getting ready for bed.
Yeah, so he's clearly in bed, ready for bed. He also had in his mouth guard. So Robert he would grind his teeth. Like a lot of people wear mouth guards so they don't grind their teeth.
Got to grind all day, all night, son. Don't be lazy.
So he wore a mouth guard every night, and everyone who wears mouth guards will confirm this, and Robert's wife confirmed this. It was the last thing he did before he went to sleep because it was uncomfortable. He didn't want to wear it longer than he had to. So, like, right before rolling over to go to bed, he puts in the mouth guard and then goes to sleep.
Wow.
His mouth guard was in. Joe is in the room, sitting on the bed, in his underwear, with his back to the door. And again, that's not chaotic. That's quiet. I'm just trying to think, if I saw my friend, who I've known for years, in my house, in my guest room, stabbed to death, would I just be sitting on the edge of the bed? Like, I would be hysterical, but he's not.
I don't know. Sometimes it takes
It could be shock.
me a while before. So I tend to be like, oh my God, and like shocked.
Yeah, it could be shock, and I'm just being judgy, but
sometimes I don't even cry at someone's dead until like you're at the funeral. Like it really, really hits me there.
Yeah.
Because you don't realize that, like, you still feel like someone's around.
No, and I think, like, I'm thinking about how I would react, possibly, but in the end of the day, until you're in that situation, you don't know how you're going to react. The medic and the police felt like it was weird. First of all, he's sitting on the bed, not saying anything, with his back to the door, after already saying that they think there's an intruder in the house, and he just has his back to the door, like not focusing on the fact that there still could be an intruder in the house.
Oh, yeah. Which one of them was Wong's friend, or was it was it 2 of them?
Joe, the one sitting on the bed.
Joe, the main one.
Yeah, he's the one sitting in the room with his body. Robert has multiple stab wounds to the chest and abdomen, and there's no blood on the walls like we'd expect or soaking into the bed. There's a thin film of blood around his wounds and a little bit of bruising around the wounds. And that's something that the medic notices immediately because it doesn't match the kind of injury that they're looking at. They've been on stabbing scenes before, and just to have a little blood around the wound is weird. One of the paramedics later describes the scene as unusually clean, and another one said that Robert appeared to be placed. Okay, that's the way he described it. He was like, it's like he was just placed there.
I'm actually looking up the picture of it now because I didn't like really analyze it. I just looked quick.
Mm-hmm. So imagine that photo and you just put Robert laying on the bed with hardly any blood anywhere.
Wait, so it was like a couch bed?
Yeah, it was a fold-out bed.
Okay, in the picture, 2 blood spots. Yeah, it looks made, but there's only 1 pillow.
But it doesn't look like anyone had any sign of struggle there. Like it looks like the bed was made, and then imagine Robert just laying on top on his back.
Oh, so he was laying on his... If he was in the center of the bed perfectly, that'd be wild. Like, who placed him dead center in the bed?
He was just laying there on the bed. No, like, it didn't look like he struggled with anybody, nothing. So EMTs then place pads. So when they first get to a scene and someone is presumed dead, they check for a pulse. They didn't get a pulse. So they ended up putting pads on him, which is from the defibrillator. A pad on his chest and a pad on his back, okay? And this is how they decide what rhythm you're in, if you have a heart rhythm, and if it's a shockable rhythm.
Oh.
If it's something that they can use the defibrillator to shock your heart back to pumping.
Okay? So some rhythms are unshockable.
Yes.
That's wild. I wonder why.
Well, we don't have to go into the reason why, but just know some rhythms are unshockable. And when they assess him, they find that he is in PEA, which is a non-shockable rhythm. So Robert's in PEA, which means pulseless electrical activity. So there's electrical activity in the heart, but it's not producing a pulse. It's not pumping blood throughout the body. And I know from personal experience, when you see PEA, especially in a trauma setting, you're making quick decisions about what is survivable and what's not. There are a few things you can do when someone is in PEA. You can start compressions, all right? So you manually pump the heart. You can't defibrillate the heart, but you can manually pump it with compressions. And the other thing you can do is give epi, which is a chemical like adrenaline that can cause the heart to restart on its own.
And is that what an EpiPen is when people are having trouble?
So, yeah, same drug, but this is a different concentration of it. And an EpiPen is given through a muscle, whereas we give epi during a code through a IV line.
Oh.
It gets there faster. And it's a different dose. Okay. If you remember our episode on Kristen Gilbert, remember that lady, the serial killer in the VA hospital who was killing all of these ICU patients?
Yeah.
She was doing it with epi, but she was doing it with the epi that goes in the muscle because the concentration is much higher. Okay. So there's 2 things you could do. You can give epi, you can start compressions, and I'm sure these medics started compressing right away. That's just what they do. They know they can't shock him, so they start compressing. And I'm sure at the same time, because I've seen medics in action and I've seen us in the trauma setting in action, you have somebody working on the patient giving them compressions, and then you have another person trying to start IV lines because you're trying to get access. So I'm sure one of the medics was doing that. The other one was trying to get an IV line so they can give Robert epi. In this case, realistically, this was not survivable. Okay, at this point, when EMS arrives, there isn't a world where Robert could have been brought back, unfortunately. Okay, the extent of his injuries were too far gone, but they have to try. Okay, yeah. You have to.
What else are you going to do while you're there? You're the ambulance.
So they load him up and they take him to the hospital, and it's not normal protocol because typically when someone is dead on the scene, medics will keep the body there.
Oh, so the police can examine everything.
And the medical examiner can declare the person dead and take them straight to the coroner's office or whatever.
Did the guys insist that the guys in the ambulance take the body with them? Was that what happened?
No. The EMTs and medics on the scene and the head medic on the scene, he decided to take him to the hospital. And I think that was a very human decision. I don't think it was a wrong decision. I think you walk into a scene like that, this guy is young. I mean, he's in his 30s.
Try to save him.
Yeah, he's in his 30s. He's otherwise a healthy man. And he sees that, like, look, he's in PEA, but, like, let's try.
When it comes down to it, it's better to save him than let him die and find out who the killer is.
Yeah.
Or who tried to kill him. If you have a chance of saving someone, you got to.
Yeah, and I think in the back of his mind, he knew he shouldn't take him to the hospital. He should leave him there because he is dead. But he also felt compassion for the fact that he's this young guy and there is a possible chance.
Miracles happen, man. Everything has to happen for the first time one day.
Yeah. So they took him to the hospital, and when they got there, I'm sure they worked hard in the trauma room to try to resuscitate him because he ended up having 2 different central lines placed in the ER, which that's what they do when they're trying to really, do life-saving measures. A central line is when they put a IV line directly into an artery because it goes directly into your heart. Okay. So they put an IV line into the arteries that feed the heart. So they put one in his neck and they put one in his groin, the femoral artery, because those 2 ways will get to the heart fast.
Sounds intense.
Yeah, it is intense.
And for whoever's watching The Pit now, since we're talking about hospitals, if you watch the finale, is the guy staying or did he go? I don't know.
I think he's going to stay.
We won't know till next season.
Yeah, we won't know till next season. So they take him to the hospital. They, I'm sure, perform all these life-saving measures in the ER, and then they pronounce him dead at 12:25. So let's talk through the autopsy. Okay, and this is where, for me, things stop being confusing because we're not talking about what he said or she said or what he saw or what they said. We have the body now that we're going to talk about, and the body tells us a lot. I read through the entire autopsy. I think it gives us a good indication and good evidence of what's going on. When you actually go through the findings piece by piece, this does not support a simple, straightforward stabbing that these guys wanted to say happened, okay? So the cause of death in the autopsy is listed as stab wounds to the torso. There are 3 wounds that penetrated the chest and abdomen, and this included his aorta, which is the major artery that feeds the heart.
How many stabs was it? 3, right?
3.
I'm just waiting to hear if they stab precisely in certain spots that won't bleed like they're serial killers.
So one of the stab wounds was in the abdomen. One of them was in the aorta, and another one was in the chest, and it punctured his lung. Okay. The aorta feeds the heart. Okay. So it's essentially the giant vessel in the middle of our body that feeds the heart.
Is stabbing that luck, or is that something you'd have to try to get?
That's a good question. I don't know if that will ever be answered, but that is a very good question. Was it strategic or was it just where it ended up? We don't know. So Robert's body is also covered in multiple puncture wounds as well. And I can tell you from experience in codes that if he's in PEA, I'm just thinking from an ER nurse perspective. If someone's in PEA, we're going to try to get an IV in multiple places, okay? And you might have 2 nurses trying to get IVs at the same time. So he had these multiple puncture wounds. Other podcasts have talked about this, and unfortunately, the prosecutor's office tried to put forth this narrative that the puncture wounds weren't from the hospital setting, but I don't believe it. Okay, I don't believe it for a second. I think they used that to kind of push a narrative that they were pushing because all of the puncture wounds were in spots where we place IVs. Okay.
Oh, so wait, what? Any of these people in medical?
I'm sure they consulted a medical person.
Or if they have the internet.
He needed to build a narrative. So he tried to say that the puncture wounds were not related to the hospital care that Robert received. But I don't believe it because there were multiple puncture wounds in the bend of his elbow, which we try to put IVs there all the time, the top of his hand, where we also try for IVs. And then there were 2 wounds, puncture wounds in his foot, which is also where we try for IVs. Because when someone is in PEA, there is not circulating blood. which means if you think about your vessels like a hose, and when there's water on and running through it, there's pressure inside. There's some pressure. So you can easily puncture your vessel and get in there with a IV line and be able to get blood return and all the things because there is blood circulating in there. However, when you're in PEA, there isn't circulating blood. So when you're trying to get into a vessel, it's really hard. And so we say in the hospital setting, we say their vessels are very clamped down because they're almost collapsed at this point.
Because there's nothing keeping them. It kind of reminds me of that hose that you turn on, it expands when there's water in it, but when you turn it off, they shrink.
Exactly.
Look at me.
Look at you. So that's exactly what was going on.
AKA the doctor.
That's exactly what is going on in this situation. I've been in codes like this a million times, all right? We're all trying to get IVs. This person doesn't have any circulating blood. Their vessels are very clamped down. It makes it really difficult. Hence the reason they went for the central line, okay? Nowadays, we have something called an IO, which pretty much looks like a drill, and we drill an IV line into your bone. It goes directly into your bone. You can either do it in the shoulder or you can do it in the shin, like the top of your tib fib.
You guys don't do that while they're awake, do you?
Sometimes.
The sound
yes,
too,
that can happen.
of your own bone.
You can be awake and get an IO. It sucks.
I'd be like, hey, yo.
Back then in 2006, however, IOs weren't big. All right. I don't even know if IOs were out in the hospital setting. They started in the field, right? So they started with paramedics. I think those were the first people to have IOs were medics. And I think they ended
it's real in the field.
I think they ended up getting the idea from the military, from military medics. But they didn't get introduced into hospitals until about 2010. Okay. So at this point, you have Robert. He's in the ED. He's getting these IVs placed. They can't find a line. So then they place central lines.
Yeah, because it's wasting time that you could be saving him, too.
Yes. So then in the autopsy, we see all of these puncture wounds, which I'm a firm believer is from the care he received at the hospital. And then we see the 2 central lines that they placed. The foot is an interesting place. There have been other podcasts that say, oh, there are these random puncture wounds in the foot, and that doesn't make sense. It does make sense. I've put IVs in anything I can get a line in, I do it. I've put IVs in a boob. I've put an IV in feet. I put them in fingers. I've put IVs in thumbs. I can put an IV, any ER nurse or anybody who's good at IVs can get an IV in very crazy places. So when
you can't get one in my thumb. There ain't no vein. I'm looking at
right
it.
Here, Russ. Right here.
Oh, the top?
Mm-hmm.
Oh, yeah, I got one.
Yeah. You can put an IV in that top vein right on top of your thumb.
Yeah, I didn't know.
So when other podcasts that you guys hear talk about these 2 puncture wounds on the feet and don't make sense, they make total sense to me.
Just say from Wife of Crime cleared that up for me.
Yes, from an ER perspective, makes total sense. And it'll make sense as we move forward with theories why people are very concerned about these puncture wounds.
I think because a lot of people are going to think he was drugged first and then killed, which does seem like a possibility the way he was laid out.
Absolutely. Okay.
I just didn't want to spoil the story.
But I'm not taking that off the table. Just because I'm accounting for the puncture wounds does not mean I'm taking off the table the drugging. So the orientation of the stab wounds is really weird. Based on how they're described, if Robert is lying on the bed, right, on his back when he was stabbed, the person would have had to enter the room, go around to the opposite side of the bed. So now this person is standing between the wall and the bed and stab him from that side of the room. So they'd have to walk in, not go right up to him. They'd have to go around the bed and go into that little spot between the wall and the bed and stab him from there.
Okay, no big deal.
But not only that,
it can happen.
It's a very tight space. Not only that, the angle of the wounds say that the knife wasn't held in a typical forward grip. So when you hold a knife, the blade side, if you're holding a knife like in the movie Psycho,
yeah,
the blade side would be facing you, right?
Usually. Not the point, the blade side.
The blade side would be facing you. The blunt side is facing away from you. So if a person's running in the room, moving to the other side of the bed, and then stabs Robert, boom, the blade should be facing that person.
Yes, I guess we would do that automatically.
As humans.
I don't know why, but the knife would be just as effective without doing that as well.
It would, but it would be weird from that angle, from a person who's standing at like his legs, to stab him and have the blade facing his head, right? Facing the opposite direction of them. But that's what happened. So according to the wounds, the blade was facing the top of his body, like his head.
Okay.
And the blunt side was facing the bottom of his body.
Okay.
So if you're thinking
so this person might be, oh shit, so this person's on the side of them, they're saying, and they're holding the knife like sideways.
They're holding the knife backwards, the way that we wouldn't hold a knife.
No, all right, so this is what it sounds like to me. So this is how you'd hold a knife, say there's a point?
Yeah.
It almost sounds like they're holding it like sideways and going...
Yeah, or they're holding it completely backwards. Opposite of how you'd normally hold a knife, with the blade facing you.
But it's still possible that someone would just grab it fast and try to kill. And
it's just not standard in a forceful run in, grab a knife, stab a person attack, okay? Because he's laying on his back and the person is coming from the bottom of the bed around to the side of the bed, you would think that the sharp part of the knife would be facing his legs.
How about this? His friend was Joe, right? So Joe could have walked up to him slowly, have the knife behind him, and while his friend's laying there, he stabs. But now when you take it from behind you, you don't know which orientation it is, because you were able to just walk up to your friend while he's laying there and like chit-chat with him.
Except that theory would work, but there's 0 defensive wounds.
Oh, so
we'll
he was
get
already
into
asleep.
theories later, but he didn't fight at all.
So he could have dozed off, but he didn't even remove the covers.
Yeah, we'll get into theories later. I just want to focus on the orientation of the knife. It's weird. It doesn't make sense. With this story of some random intruder running in, grabbing a kitchen knife, running upstairs, and stabbing him 3 times, it doesn't make sense.
No, I know nobody did that. We all know it was one of the 3 people in the house.
I know, but there are 2 questions that arise from this. Was he actually stabbed in the bed then? Right?
Oh.
Or because it could have been that a person was standing at the top of his head and stabbing with the knife down that way, and then the blade would make sense that the blade side is facing his head versus his feet.
I see what you're saying.
So what it does is it creates a space for us to question, was he stabbed in the bed at all? And was the person actually on the side of him or near his feet when they stabbed him, on the bottom half of him, or were they near his head, standing near his head, stabbing him? Because either it happened somewhere else and his body was in a completely different position, or the person stabbing him is just super weird and holds a knife in a really weird way. That's the only 2 options to explain it.
It could be the person is a killer, and being a killer is weird.
True. So just even coming around to the other side of the bed and squeezing into a place that you have barely any room to move is weird too, to stab somebody from that side. It doesn't make sense. This just raises more questions. Why would they go to the other side of the bed? Why would they have the knife facing the wrong direction? So it doesn't line up with the idea of someone being suddenly attacked by an intruder. If it were a straightforward stabbing, the weapon would also help clarify things. The weapon should line up with the injuries, but it doesn't. The knife that's found in the room is traced back to the kitchen in the house. And the men said that. They said, this intruder took a knife from our kitchen, right?
So he wasn't stabbed with that knife?
No.
That means they threw away the weapon.
So this knife is sitting on the nightstand, and there is blood on it. But the blood doesn't look the way you'd expect, okay? There's not blood saturating it. It's not all over the handle. There is blood on the blade, but it almost looks like it was wiped on there. And when they tested the knife, they found white fibers, and the towel they used to put compression on his body and that there was blood on was a white towel. Okay, so they found these fabric fibers on the knife. So it's literally like they wiped the knife with blood. Robert was wearing a gray t-shirt, and there were holes in his t-shirt where the stabbings happened. But there were no gray fibers found on the knife. So if there's white fibers found, you'd assume gray fibers would be found on the knife. No gray fibers were found on that knife, only white fibers, and it looked like the blood was wiped on it. So now you're looking at a knife that doesn't match the injuries that it's supposed to have caused. So it's clear that this isn't the murder weapon. The murder weapon was staged and placed.
Book him, Dano. There's so many people that get arrested for so much less. This
I know.
is crazy. Them and David, like everybody's getting away with everything.
They find out that there is another knife set in the house. There's a cutlery set in Dylan Ward's bedroom. Something he said that was a gift from his mom, but one of the knives from the cutlery set is missing and has never been recovered. And the knife from the cutlery set in Dylan's room would have matched this scene way better than the knife found on the nightstand. So when police ask him about this missing knife from his cutlery set that they found in his room, the explanation that he gave is that he lent the knife to his mother. One knife, not the whole set, just one, lent it to his mother and that she lost it. When they asked his mother, she said she did lose it and she hasn't seen it in a long time.
Well, he told her to say that.
Of course. And that doesn't prove anything on its own, right? These little details. But it's just another layer.
A little fishy.
Another thing that says this crime didn't occur the way these men are saying it did, and that there's way more happening here. Now we get to the toxicology, because the tox screen comes back negative for any substances in Robert's body. No drugs.
Okay, so he wasn't drugged, obviously.
But that doesn't close that door, because not everything is tested for.
What? The DNA shop would never. We test for everything. You don't even have to ask. We do full tests for the price of a short test.
This medical examiner tested for the typical drugs, GHB, the date rape drug, barbiturates, like things like Xanax or Ativan or something like that, right? She tested for all the typical drugs, but one that she did not test for, and some people say she did, and I found out and have confirmed that she did not test for ketamine. Ketamine was not included in the screening, and this is a very important drug. And at the time, in the early 2000s, in Washington, D.C., in the club environment and in the gay club environment especially, ketamine was huge, okay? But she didn't test for it.
Oh, I didn't know that.
No, and a lot of people don't know that.
No, I was saying I didn't know ketamine was huge in the gay community.
It's huge in the gay community. It's huge in the club community. People who go to raves and clubs do a lot of ketamine as well.
That's what killed Matthew Perry.
Oh, did it? Was it ketamine?
Ketamine, and then I think he drowned in his pool.
Oh, that's sad.
Oh, not pool, hot tub, I think it was.
So this immediately, whenever people talk about this case, they just say the toxicology report came back negative, nothing was found. Boom. End of story about toxicology. But that is not true, okay? Because they didn't test for paralytics. And there are other paralytics in that world that they didn't test for.
So who makes the request for what's supposed to be tested?
Well, the medical examiner probably has a list of standard drugs that are tested for in a typical tox screen, because paralytics are not easy to get a hold of. Ketamine is one that is now, but it's not a typical drug that's used in a crime like this.
What is ketamine? Do you smoke it? Do you eat it?
You can do a lot of things with it. We use it in the hospital a lot. You can sniff it. You can melt it and you can inject it.
Oh.
I don't think you could smoke it.
Well, now you guys know what to do with ketamine.
Yeah, there you go. So we're not going to completely close that door, okay? So ketamine is a dissociative anesthetic. And when it's used in the medical setting, we use it for pain relief. We use it for paralyzing people, knocking them out. For intubating you, we'll give you ketamine. You'll get ketamine post-surgery, during surgery. There's a lot of different ways to use it in the hospital setting. But it's used recreationally in clubs. And in the 90s and early 2000s, in the club scene, it was used a lot. And I want to be really clear, this is not about making assumptions about lifestyles, all right? Just because you're gay and you go to clubs doesn't mean you're going to use ketamine, obviously. But we got to talk about it because it would make sense, all right? These are gay men in D.C.
Like they're more likely to try ketamine because there's the drugs around them are ketamine. So they have easy access to it.
They have easy access to it.
Yeah.
All right. And I want to talk about my friend. I have a good friend. His name is Herson. He's gay. He's from D.C. I talked to him a lot about this case. He's my D.C. gay consultant. Okay. Me and him talked through this whole case together at work.
Does he listen to this?
He listens to some episodes.
Oh.
So we talked through this case together, and he confirmed that, yes, ketamine, or people refer to it as Special K, is a big drug that's used in that environment. All right.
Be careful, folks. This world is so scary with all that fentanyl for you people that be careful, man. That shit's so scary. Some people are doing drugs for the first time and they die.
I know.
Nuts.
It's so scary. So at lower doses, ketamine can create a kind of detached, dreamlike state. People describe it as feeling disconnected from their body. They don't feel pain.
Hey.
And they kind of disassociate from what's happening around them. And as the dose increases, it becomes more intense to the point where people can become paralyzed, like unable to move, unable to respond, or completely lose consciousness.
Until it wears off?
Until it wears off, or you OD and die from it.
Okay.
And that's where this becomes really relevant, because when you look at the body that shows no signs of struggle, no defensive wounds, no attempt to fight back, you have to at least ask whether something could have been given to this person to cause them to not respond.
They could have gave him ketamine. I wonder if you could sneak it in something like they drink.
They could have injected him with ketamine.
Injecting, that's
very
tough.
Easily.
Nah, if you give me a needle, you're going to wake me up, though.
But you're going to be out in a matter of a few minutes because you were just injected with it. You can't stop it. It's working in your body already.
Well, that's going to suck for them, because in that last few minutes, I'm going to whoop their ass. You just stuck me with a needle.
So this doesn't prove anything on its own, but again, we're getting more details that show that this is a big possibility that he was drugged. And this is not how these men described this all happening. Now, we have to talk about the detection in the tox screening. So depending on timing and metabolism and what's actually included in the tox screen, certain substances can't be identified either. So there's another paralytic that people throw around in this case, and it's called succinylcholine. And when we give it to people, and we call it Sucks. That's what we call it.
Yeah, I was thinking that's a really weird name for a drug.
And rocuronium. Those are the two drugs.
What, did a 5-year-old name the last one?
So rocuronium.
They're like, what
Sucks.
should we name this drug? Mary? Rocuronium.
Yeah. Sucks and rock is what we use. We use one of them along with another drug right before we intubate somebody. So right before we're about to put a tube down your throat and put you on a breathing machine, on a ventilator, we are injecting you with Sucks or rock and a drug called etomidate. And that is going to paralyze you.
Oh.
Okay. And completely put you under. Pretty much when they say you're in a, you're put under or in a medically induced coma, these are the drugs that we use to put you in that state to intubate you, and then you're put under. So you got them before you were intubated.
Yeah.
Now, the tox screen can't test for succinylcholine.
And that sucks in colon.
Because it metabolizes in the body super fast. So it acts really fast. So as soon as you inject the person, literally within minutes, they're done. They're paralyzed. Okay.
What if they were walking? Would they just fall, or would they start to feel drowsy then lay down?
No, they'd probably fall. I mean, it's that fast.
Okay.
It paralyzes you really fast, but then it also is metabolized in the body really fast. So that's why people throw that one around in this case, because It didn't come up on the tox screen, but I don't think that the ME even tested for it anyway. But it's something that has a rapid onset and can happen super quick. And then lastly, there's the finding that changed the direction of this case, the one that we talked about last week, which is the presence of Robert's own semen found around his genitals and in his anal canal. They found his semen on him and in him.
How, Sway?
And there was no trauma, so it didn't look like a sexual assault because there wasn't bruising down there. It didn't look like any trauma occurred.
Consensual?
Yes. There has been talked about, was this consensual? Could it have been consensual? There are lack of defensive wounds, lack of movement, the overall condition of the scene, right?
But if you are drugged, you can't defend yourself. So then
There
you
you
start
go.
to mix those up.
Exactly. Okay, so see how this case does this to you? You start going down a path and then boom, you're hit with another issue. You start going down the other path and you're like, oh no, that can't happen because of this. That's what this case does. And this is why I've been hyperfixated on it for weeks, because I can't figure it out. And you guys know, and you know, I need to know. I need to know.
She's getting intense, ladies.
So we do have this debate online, especially with theories. If you go down the Reddit rabbit hole with this one, there are people who talk about, was this consensual? And we'll talk about that later as we move on.
I'd just say, what I think in that is, it could be.
It could be. And during the investigation and then the subsequent trial that occurred, the defense argued a decent argument. And I have to say, when you first hear it, it makes a lot of sense. They said that there has been proof in other cases when sexual assault did not occur that because of the prostate gland and the fact that people excrete fluids when they die, okay? I mean, this happens when people die. A lot of times they poop, they pee, fluids are released.
They breathe.
That can happen.
Yeah, it's scary. I've seen people jump on TV.
Yeah, they can breathe out.
And make a sound.
And they can make a sound, yes. And experts say that in other cases, semen has been found to have been excreted by the body. And that's what the defense said. And that was their argument, that no, this wasn't a sexual assault. Semen probably was excreted when all of his other fluids were excreted. Like when other things happen, this happens in the body. But the defense also argued that the semen didn't include sperm. It was just the fluid, but there were no actual sperm in it, which can account for the fact that it wasn't something that he actually did. It was something that happened naturally through the postmortem process.
Oh, shit.
This is what the defense said, okay? You have to remember, they are arguing for their clients.
Oh, so it could be.
So this is all possibilities, okay? This is all possible.
I don't care. Even if we just ignore the sperm and the sex part, one of you three still did something.
Yes,
He's
definitely.
dead, whether he was raped or not. He's dead, and you guys got to pay.
100%. And we're not, I agree with you. But this is the kind of crap that goes back and forth within these types of cases. So experts did say that this can happen. It is physiologically possible. However, usually it happens when a body has been dead longer than a few hours. And his autopsy occurred like a few hours after his death. I mean, within the next day, it was occurring. So these other cases that they cited, I guess the people had been dead for multiple weeks or maybe a month. And that would make more sense because your body, there's a decomposition period that happens. Your body is wasting away at that point because it's been a few weeks.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of back and forth about that. And there's no definitive way to prove which one is correct, right? We don't know for sure that in this case, that didn't happen. There's no way to prove 100%, that's what happened. But when you take all of this stuff together, the wound patterns, the lack of external blood, the unexplained puncture marks, they say unexplained puncture marks, but, I have my own theories about that. The internal findings, It's just not a straightforward set of events. So, the medical examiner did say that they believed Robert was still alive when he was stabbed because there was significant blood in his GI tract, which means the blood that was in his body, there was like blood inside of his abdominal cavity because he did internally bleed a lot. He started digesting it because it got into his stomach and it started being digested by his intestines. So they found a ton of blood in his intestines. So that shows he might have still been alive when he was stabbed because his digestive system was still working and blood was going through it. Very complicated, okay? Now we're going to shift. We're going to shift focus and we're going to talk about the three men in the house. And I want to say, I'm not going to go over everything about these men and their relationship and all the ins and outs and complexities of that relationship. If you do want to know all of that, definitely go listen to the Consult, the podcast I talked about earlier. They go deep into these men's relationships, their relationship pasts, and all the things. I'm just going to kind of glaze over that. But it is important to understand who these three guys are. So Joe Price, Victor Zaborski, Dylan Ward, they were all very educated, successful, very well-off men in their different careers, okay? Joe Price was an attorney. He was a partner at a major law firm. He made a lot of money. He had a really strong professional reputation. And not only that, he and Victor were like the poster boys for gay marriage at the time. This is the early 2000s. Gay marriage is just now starting to be talked about, trying to legalize it. Certain states are starting to talk about it. They were in, I think they were in like ABC News or Newsday or something. An article was written about them because they are two professional, white, gay men, wealthy, who were in a domestic partnership, who just looked like they had it all together. And so they became like the poster boys for gay marriage, which is ironic because they had all this crazy shit going on when they brought this third dude into their relationship. Yeah. Meanwhile, a lot of gays at the time were trying to show like we can be close to heteronormative, like we can have the white picket fence, we can have the nice marriage the way that you guys want us to have. And so these two men showed that.
Wait, like you guys want us to have? What does that even mean?
Like the typical heterosexual Christian lawmakers. A lot of people oppose gay marriage because they think it's supposed to be between a man and a woman. So a lot of gay advocates at the time, before gay marriage was legalized, were trying to show, no, we love each other. We can have healthy marriages too. We can have healthy families too. So these two men were the poster boys for that. Articles were written about them. They were very widely known. Meanwhile, Joe Price has Dylan Ward in his life, and these two men are having a full-blown BDSM relationship that Victor's not a part of.
Hey, Joe's living his best life, man.
I guess so.
He's pimping.
So these men were from the outside. They looked like they had it all together, okay? And Joe met Robert back in college. They were both involved in student government. And this wasn't some distant connection. They had a long-standing friendship for years. Victor was also very well established professionally. He worked at a super high-level marketing company, and he was one of the people who coined the term "Got Milk."
Oh, shit.
For the Got Milk campaign. He was like a major player in that.
Yeah. Not that it's very impressive that you thought of it. I just saw it all over the place.
Yeah, like it was everywhere. We all heard Got Milk.
Yeah, you weren't that creative, fella.
So Victor and Joe had been in a committed relationship for years. And then they bring Dylan Ward in. And Dylan wasn't like these two guys, okay? He was on a different path. He came from a wealthy family. His father was like a really famous cardiologist. He was highly educated. He got a couple different degrees, actually. He got a degree in foreign service, and then he went to culinary school and became a chef. And then he also got another degree in children's literature. So he was like really well educated.
It sounds like he's one of those people that are professional at going to school.
Yeah,
Like you don't get a job until you're 40. You just keep going to school. Keep going to school.
And he couldn't find his path. He kept bouncing from career to career to career. I don't know where they met. I think they had mutual friends. He ended up renting their basement apartment in a different home. And then this is where they became friends. And then Joe and Dylan probably talked about the fact that they were either both into BDSM. BDSM is not something that you just like wake up one day and decide you want to be part of. Like a lot of people start off by like looking it up, looking at different porn, but there are big communities centered around BDSM. Every year in DC, they have a leather festival.
All I know about BDSM from what I see on TV is they put that ball gag in your mouth.
Yeah, they do things. Essentially what it is, it's a relationship where there's a dominant person and a submissive person. Sometimes they'll have a contract between them. These two men did have a contract between them. They had, and a lot of these types of relationships do. So the dominant says, you're going to do X, Y, and Z for me. And if you don't, these are the consequences and you're going to get punished. Okay. We hear that with like dominatrix, right? That's something that we know goes on where people will hire a dominatrix to come and like make them crawl on the floor and put a leash on them.
I heard of that.
Pretty much abuse them, right?
I mean, I'll fuck you up for some money.
This is all sexual. This is all sexually motivated. People do this to get off. And sometimes you don't actually have to have sex with the person. Just the act of being controlled by somebody or controlling somebody gets these people off. And it's a whole lifestyle.
You know what I could do for them? I could run over their balls with my wheels.
I guess you could. Oh my God. So anyway, there are communities. They have a leather festival in DC, okay? And it's not something that you just wake up one day and be like, I'm into BDSM.
And not everyone's body type is good for leather either.
I guess not. So these two, one of them, we don't know who. I know for a fact Joe was into this, but we don't know who introduced the idea to the other person. But Dylan is renting the downstairs apartment, and somehow they find out that one of them are into it, and Dylan agrees to be the dominant for Joe, who wants to be the submissive person. And then the two of them form a contract. Victor is not involved in any of this. Victor doesn't want any part of it.
But he knows.
He knows about it.
Okay.
He's allowing it, but he doesn't want to be part of it. He's allowing his husband to have this relationship with this other person.
He's allowing his husband to get ran through. Basically, Joe is like Jada Pinkett Smith over here.
Yeah. They are described as being in a 3-person relationship, like in a throuple. But Joe and Victor are the primary couple, right? They're long-term, they're established. Dylan was brought in for a very sexual reason. But he's kind of like there just for that. He's Joe's boyfriend.
Yeah, that's
right?
going to get messy, no matter what.
And that kind of relationship, some people thrive in it. Listen, if you want to be dominated or you want to dominate somebody and it works for your relationship and you guys are into it, like, kudos to you.
Keep pimping.
That's great. Do your thing. But it becomes relevant because of what was found in this home, okay? What happened in this home with this innocent man who just came to spend the night?
What kind of BDSM equipment was in that house?
I'm about to get into it.
Oh, shit.
So investigators process the scene, and in Dylan's room, they find a whole range of BDSM-related items. They find restraints. They find hoods, like you can put a hood over someone's face.
A jackhammer.
They find collars. They find a lot of restraint equipment, like equipment that goes with the restraints, okay?
Oh.
And among the items...
To plug up holes?
They found those as well. And among these items, they found the Aero Stec device. Now, I didn't know what this was But if you all were to see my computer history at this point, you guys would think I'm into some freaky shit because I was going down the rabbit hole, looking up all this stuff about BDSM. I was looking up all this stuff about the different equipment that they have and about the AeroStech device. Now, what this is, and it's an electrical stimulation device. It's an e-stim device. And, it can induce...
Put it on your stuff.
So you can use this device and connect things to it, like cock rings or dildos or whatever. And you can cause a physical response. If you have a cock ring that's connected to this device, it can cause a physical response.
So it's like a remote.
To occur. And this can include ejaculation. And it can happen even if someone is unable to participate. Because that device, the stimulation from it, goes on the person and it can cause them to ejaculate without them trying. It's a physiological response to the stimulation. Okay? Now, that to me says a lot. I feel like that's very indicative of something that could have happened here in this case.
Another possibility.
Because you don't have to actively participate. And you can ejaculate. And what did they find? They found semen on him, his own semen, and they found no, defense wounds or bruises or signs of a struggle. And that's where this all starts to intersect with the rest of the case. Because when you take that, all these devices found, and you take that specific device that was found, and you place it next to what we know about Robert's body and what happened with his body through the autopsy, these questions are really hard to ignore. Prosecutors leaned heavily into this, all right? So their theory was that Robert had been incapacitated. They believed Robert was drugged. They believed Robert was sexually assaulted. And they believed that this device could have been involved. But the defense strongly, obviously, pushed back. They argued that there was no evidence of any of those items being used on Robert, and that introducing them would only invite too much speculation and bias, and it wouldn't allow a jury to be able to look at the case objectively. So because of that, all of that evidence was taken out at the trial.
Wait, so all of the evidence that proved that they were guilty was taken out?
All of the evidence that could have proved that a sexual assault occurred was taken out of this trial. They couldn't use it. The prosecution couldn't use it at this trial.
Well, he still got stabbed.
But yes, exactly. He still got stabbed, but they couldn't bring in the sexual assault angle. So that leaves us in a very specific place, right? Relationships are layered. Relationships are confusing. This relationship in particular was incredibly messy. This relationship with these three men was very messy. And the physical environment includes tools that are associated with restraint and incapacitation, right? So all these things were there.
But he didn't have marks from being restrained?
He didn't have any marks from being restrained. No. The investigators just kept circling back to these men. At this point, the investigators do not believe the intruder story. We don't like when cops zero in because we want them to remain open-minded. But they pretty much zeroed in on these three guys.
They said a ninja killed him.
And it didn't make sense
in
to
the middle
cops.
of the night.
Yeah, so they brought them in for questioning. Joe, Victor, and Dylan were all immediately separated at the police station. But prior to going to the police station, they were all together sitting on the couch in the living room. And there's a lot happening in the house. There's a lot of people moving around. They definitely had an opportunity to whisper at each other. And there were a couple moments when cops were talking to them in the house that as soon as Dylan or Victor would say something that seemed like it could possibly implicate them or that Joe didn't like, Joe would immediately give them the death stare and those two men would shut up.
See, now that could also be because you know that cops will try to pin something on someone. But in this case, I do not believe that was it. Like, they were telling each other to shut up and keep our story to what it is.
Yes.
And wait, one of them was a lawyer.
Yes.
Yeah.
Joe was a lawyer.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So he knows how to act.
He knows what he should and shouldn't say. And he knows what they should and shouldn't say. And so in the beginning, they weren't separated, but then they eventually separated the men and they took them to the station and questioned them separately. And the questioning lasted hours, but they all just kept repeating the same story, exactly the same. No variations at all. Same exact story, same exact timeline, exactly how it happened. There was a time where they took a break, and for the life of me, I don't understand why they would do this. But the cops allowed 3 men to go outside and sit in a car together.
And powwow?
And talk. And then they brought them back into the station. Like, that's idiotic to me.
Are they detained? Because
no.
So they could walk out whenever they want. They could say, we're going out to the car, we'll be back, if they're not being detained.
They could. Yeah, they could. But like, to allow them to,
can't stop it.
To come together and speak. And
Joe knew you could do that.
Yeah,
he's a lawyer.
He knew.
So he knew, hey, we're all going to go out and talk. We'll be back in a little bit. We're not being, we haven't been charged with anything. We're not being detained.
Yeah.
Guarantee he knew his rights.
And after that first night and all that questioning, these 3 men lawyered up with the best defense attorneys in Washington, D.C. I mean, these were high-powered defense attorneys.
Oh, yeah, they're in that world.
Yeah. So after that, cops had no access to them. This was their only opportunity. But they were pretty rock solid in their story, and they didn't break. None of them broke. It really stood out how consistent their story was, because in most cases, when something traumatic happens, people don't give perfectly aligned accounts, right? There's gaps, there's confusion, there's some unsure moments. But here, the story, in a way, almost feels practiced. It almost feels planned, practiced, talked about, rehearsed. Investigators later described Joe as very controlled, very confident, almost arrogant, and even at times dismissive.
He definitely let them know he was a lawyer many times.
Oh, I'm sure. Victor initially came across as very emotional. He was hysterical, and he was still hysterical when cops were there at the house. He's the one on the 911 call. He's the one bawling his eyes out.
Mm.
And then Dylan is described by cops as very calm, quiet, detached almost, not reactive in any way. And people do respond to trauma very differently. There's no one correct way to act. But when you take all of that behavior and you place it next to everything we've gone through, it stands out the way they're acting. While this is all happening, the investigation itself is unfolding. And there are a lot of problems. There's a lot of physical evidence that was lost. There are a lot of issues with the investigation. And they made a lot of mistakes, and a lot of critical mistakes. The crime scene was not handled as tightly as it should have been. People were allowed to move around in there. The scene wasn't immediately locked down in the way you'd expect.
How do you lock it down if the people live there? Do you tell them they can't come in because it's a crime scene?
Yeah, they can't come home while they're it's a crime scene. You got to go. You got to go find somewhere to go. Yeah, your house is a crime scene. You got to go. You can't just be like trampling through, like, let me go brush my teeth.
I didn't know that.
Yeah, your house doesn't belong to you at that point. Someone was murdered in your home. They have to investigate it.
Damn, they got all those people in there stealing my stuff.
And they're destroying your house because they're going through all your shit. And so those early hours in that window where evidence really matters, things can be lost without realizing it. And there was also issues with evidence collection. Like I told you before, Robert's BlackBerry. They kind of got a picture of his final moments. They read through his emails, and then they didn't keep it as evidence. They gave it back to the company.
Contacts or nothing.
They returned it to his workplace before it could have been fully analyzed.
I thought they got all the information as far as take every contact in the phone down, take all that stuff.
No, they did not. That's why I said that the investigators in this case made some critical mistakes.
They don't watch TV?
I know, right? And then you have like the broader issue of focus, because very early on, investigators became convinced that the intruder theory was bullshit. And while that's probably true, I would agree with them, it makes them narrow their investigation too much and a little too quickly. And they're not being as objective as they should be because they're just focused on these guys. When you're looking at every single possibility, you go a little deeper. You really look at everything. You don't just try to prove that these 3 men did it. You try to look at all the possibilities, and that way you can get more details.
So you hit up Japan, the Ninja Alliance, and you say, hey, do you have any possibly are there any ninjas in my area working around this time? And they let you know.
Yeah.
And if that's not it, then one of these 3 did it.
I know, but you know what I'm saying.
Yeah, but it's okay in this situation.
I know, we all hate them. I get it. It's okay in this situation.
Because to me, they're zeroing on the right people. Because if they didn't do it, which they did, they know what the fuck happened.
Yeah.
Nobody came in there to kill. Get out of here.
So you have these inconsistencies, and you have a scene that doesn't make sense. But what you don't have is proof that can definitively tie any one person to the act itself. That's what ultimately shapes everything that comes next. So after all this, the scene, the body, the inconsistencies, the investigation, you would think that this moves toward a murder charge. But it doesn't. No one was charged with murder. And that's insane to me. This man is dead and stabbed, and no one is charged with murder.
What were they charged with?
In order to charge someone with murder, prosecutors need more than suspicion. They need to be able to prove.
They have a dead body.
They need to be able to prove beyond a reasonable doubt who did it and how and possibly why.
How about this?
But there's no definitive murder weapon, okay, because they know that that knife found wasn't the one. They can't find the one that did it. There's no eyewitnesses. There's no confession. There's no DNA found on Robert's body besides touch DNA, because he was in their house. So, of course, he's sleeping on their sheets. Of course, there's going to be their DNA on his body, but there's not like fluid DNA on his body. So none of this could hold up in court with a murder charge. So this case took a totally different turn, because after the initial murder, the whole community supported these men, because they convinced everybody of this intruder theory.
Oh, my God.
People in the community believed it. And Kathy, his wife, who was distraught, couldn't believe, she couldn't wrap her mind around that Joe, his college friend who'd known him for years, and people that she knew so well, Joe and Victor, could have done this to her husband. So she believed it.
Oh, my God.
Then, this is crazy to me. At Robert's funeral, you know how people have a receiving line where people come at a funeral and the family will stand in line and everyone will come down and shake their hand and say how sorry they are?
Yeah.
Joe had his own receiving line at Robert's funeral. Like, that's supposed to be designated for the family.
You're just a friend.
Not only that, you probably murdered him, or Dylan murdered him, and you know about it, and you're covering it up.
He's
and
really
you
going
have a
with it.
receiving line at his funeral.
This sounds like a book.
I know.
Like someone wrote this. Like it's not like real.
I know. So years after, a couple years after this crime, all 3 men, Joe Price, Victor Zaborski, and Dylan Ward, were charged with obstruction of justice, conspiracy, and tampering with evidence. That's all they could get them on.
Yeah, but you still get a lot for that.
And the prosecutors, they were doing the best they could with what they could prove. So they were like, we know you did it, and we know we have this narrative. We're not allowed to introduce anything about sexual assault, so that has to be taken off the table. So now we just have to prove that one of you did it and all of you are covering it up. And we don't know how you did it, or we don't know that one of you definitely did it. You just might know who did it because it was in your house, and you all are covering it up.
And I know they were thinking, once we charge them and they're facing years, they're going to snitch. Like someone's going to sing.
So they did think that. And what they ended up doing was the investigators decided, all right, let's bring one of them in and see if they'll crack. Being a profiler.
I'll bring in Dylan.
What? Hold on. Do you know the names?
Dylan's the sex slave.
Dylan is the dom. Hold on. Now, this is interesting because if I asked anybody else, and even myself, and even everybody would say, if you want to crack somebody, who are you bringing in?
Victor.
Victor.
Because he was crying.
Yes.
Yes, but listen to this.
Okay.
Dylan hasn't been there that long. He don't give a fuck about them that much. He will tell on them.
Okay.
So he's going to sing. Whether he sings the truth or not, you're going to get some truth out of it, but he, out of all of them, would talk.
Interesting that you chose Dylan because they chose Dylan. That's who they chose, that they thought they could bring him in, they could question him, and they could make him crack.
Because there's no loyalty. The other two have loyalty to each other.
Yeah, I see that now that you say that. I think when I first heard it, I was like, what? Dylan? Why? You should bring Victor in. Victor is the more sensitive one. Victor's the more emotional one. Victor is the one that was distraught. And I truly believe, and I'm going to tell my theory at the end. Okay, I'm saving my theory for the end, but I truly believe, I don't believe Victor knew that something happened to Robert until after it happened.
So when he's called and he actually made the phone call.
I believe that the scream that the neighbor heard was Victor. I don't believe it was Robert.
That's a good theory.
So I would have chose Victor to bring in and question and try to crack. But they brought in Dylan. Let's try to get one of them separated, and let's bring Dylan in and see if he can crack.
You can still get him to snitch, though, I think. You can let them bring their lawyer. You talk about the amount of years they're facing. And, you know, we could get some possible deals done here or something.
So another crazy thing about this case is it did not have a jury trial. It was not tried in front of a jury. It was a bench trial.
And these guys are so connected to all the judges and stuff.
Well, a bench trial, do you know what a bench trial is?
I assumed this was with a judge.
Yeah, it's a full trial, but the judge is the one that determines the outcome, not a jury.
That's what I was guessing.
So that's really, for the defense, amazing news. A bench trial. I mean, they argued that this has been a couple years now. It was so highly publicized. These men now, the community has turned on them at this point.
Wow.
Kathy herself has turned on them at this point.
And they're not in jail while the trial is going on, right?
No. So these men were originally indicted a little bit after the crime occurred, and then the indictment was dropped. They ended up on house arrest awaiting this bench trial. But at this point, now that they're on trial for it, the community turned against them. People didn't believe the intruder theory anymore. And his wife, Kathy, didn't believe it anymore. Kathy even did a press conference begging for the person to come forward. And the way she worded it was so like commendable, because during her press conference, she said, living with a murder is one of the most agonizing things that you could do. Like living with that on your conscience, living with that in your head that you killed someone is one of the worst things you could do. And you're going to suffer with that for the rest of your life. But you can atone for it if you come forward.
You hope they suffer with that. But there are evil people out there that they wouldn't even think twice.
Yeah.
Look at all these serial killers and stuff. They basically kill for sport.
It's true. Yeah.
Like the Long Island serial killer, you know? He basically killed for sport. Like
he did.
It seemed like it was his hobby.
It's crazy. It was definitely for sport. And it's sick when you think about it.
Yeah.
The judge is applying the law very strictly, but she's applying the law. It's very different from a jury taking everything in, taking all this information in. Juries are more emotional. Juries are going to be thinking about feelings. Juries are going to identify with Kathy. They're going to hear all about Robert and how amazing of a person he was. This is going to be very different from a judge listening to this, because the judge has to be incredibly non-biased and strictly by the book and by the law.
I'm dying to see how much time they got.
Every piece of evidence has to meet a certain standard, and every theory has to be supported in a specific way. And in this case, that standard wasn't met. And Judge Lynn Leibowitz ultimately finds all three men not guilty on all charges.
She knew Joe, that because in the world of judges and lawyers and all that, they're all connected. They know each other. They see each other all the time in that courtroom. Hey, Bill. Hey, Joe, I swear I've seen it when I'm in court.
I know. But when you read, so it's interesting because when you read her full, I forgot what it's called, her decision, right?
Yep.
She wrote a whole decision, because judges during bench trials, they have to write this long decision, go through every piece of evidence and explain what law they used for this and that. And it's super detailed. When you read her decision, she says, because it's online, you can read it. She says, I know you know who did it. I know the intruder theory is bullshit. She didn't say that obviously in those words, but She says, I know you guys know who did it, but there is no way to prove that you actively covered it up.
That is their friend.
That's
and that
what
she did
says.
such a great job by saying that, covering up that she is their friend.
Possibly.
No, 100%. Money in the bank. Sign it. Cash that check.
Well, she makes it very clear she does not find the intruder explanation credible whatsoever. What she says is that the government failed to prove beyond a reasonable doubt that these 3 men committed the acts they are accused of, and that is it.
There's reasonable doubt on everything. Like every case, unless it's on video and you're actually like watching it, there's a chance that that person didn't do it and that person over there is lying.
Yeah.
So there could be reasonable doubt on any case. That's their friend. She's guilty. Someone look into that. Go ahead, folks. Get her.
Her name is Judge Lynn Leibovitz.
Fraud. Crooked.
I don't know.
Hopefully I never end up in a courtroom and they play this back to me.
To be honest, I don't know if she's crooked because when you read through her decision, she criticizes them. She makes it very clear that this is not okay.
She makes it very clear that she's not their friend, but still lets them off.
But I think she was a little bit of a coward because I think she was too afraid to make the decision to say that these men were guilty of conspiracy.
To lock up prominent lawyers in your world.
Yeah. I don't know, man.
I know.
It's crazy. So all 3 of them.
So they got off for the homie.
Completely got off.
But they all should go to jail for trying to cover it up. That's what we could do. We know you guys covered it up. There's a charge for that.
No, that's what they were charged with.
But they covered it up.
But there's no way to prove it. How do you prove they covered it up? There's no actual way to prove without a reasonable doubt. The judge said there's no way to prove these men covered it up.
I don't know how to verbally say it, but it's obvious.
It's obvious to us.
No, I don't know how to. No.
And every other person in the world. But this judge used the law to say that it's not beyond a reasonable doubt.
Well, she chose that law because she could have. There was other laws she could have chose to convict him. She is on a mole.
Well, these men got off. They ended up, Victor and Joe ended up moving to Miami, and they live in South Florida now. And they have a home in D.C. and a home in South Florida or something. They sold the Swan Street house for $1.4 million and went on with their lives. And
Murderous.
Dylan, so they all stayed together for a while, but now, to this day, like right now, Victor and Joe are still married and still together, and Dylan is not part of their relationship.
I bet you they pay Dylan to keep his mouth shut.
So that's the thing that a lot of people talk about is why hasn't Dylan come forward to snitch? He's not in the relationship with them anymore. Dylan's married to a whole other person. But it's because all 3 of them have to be involved, because even if they're not romantically involved anymore, if they come to snitch, it's going to...
And one covered it up, and they all know. Then they're all going down.
Guilty. You're all going to go down.
Oh, they are guilty.
So
there's enough evidence there. He's dead in your house. There it goes.
But
Got
there's
it.
not.
One of the 3 of you did it.
Listen.
Who are these idiots?
You're preaching to the choir, but according to the law, according to that judge, they didn't prove it. The state didn't prove it.
Well, that judge should be demoted. What do you do before a judge? You should go back to apprenticeship. You should have failed your apprenticeship of thinking of stuff.
So this case, that's how the actual case ends, right? It ends with these 3 men being free and living life. And then there's Kathy. And I think before we even get into the theories and all that, we have to talk about Kathy, because imagine going through all of this as his wife, hearing everything everyone is saying, everything we talked about up to this point, the timelines, the evidence, the theories. This is all the worst night of Kathy's life. This is the worst moment in her life. She sends her husband off to work thinking it's a normal day. He calls her that night, and then he emails her. It never gets to her, but he emails her that he's about to go to bed at his friend's house. There's nothing alarming about that. And then hours later, Joe calls her and says there was a stabbing Robert's hurt. He's at the hospital. She doesn't know he's dead yet. She shows up to the hospital and she finds out that he died violently in his friend's home. And I just think about that as a wife. And it's almost impossible to even process, because your brain would immediately start to try to make sense of it. You want answers. You want something that feels logical, something to hold on to. And there's nothing like that here.
Shit, if that was my spouse, we all three of us are right here in this living room and we ain't leaving till the questions are answered.
Yeah, well,
nobody would move.
She didn't know about his death until she got to the hospital, and she stayed with him. So in the beginning, Kathy accepted what she was told by these men. She accepted the intruder theory, that something random and tragic happened to her husband. And that's not unusual. She's distraught. She wants answers.
Yeah.
You're relying on the information that's given to you from the people who you trust and your husband trusted. But as time goes on, it starts to shift. Because the more that comes out, the inconsistencies, the lack of evidence supporting their story, and the questions that never get answered, it becomes harder for her to believe it. And eventually, Kathy files a civil lawsuit against these men. Not just for closure, but for accountability. Because if she files a civil lawsuit, I think it was a $20 million lawsuit. It was something crazy. She files this lawsuit, then this whole thing can't die. They still have to look into evidence.
Clever.
Because even though the criminal case didn't result in convictions, the civil system operates differently. The burden of proof is a lot lower. So it's not about proving beyond a reasonable doubt whether something happened or not. And through that process, she keeps pushing and she continues asking questions, continues looking for answers, and continues refusing to just accept the things that can't be explained. And I think that takes a whole different type of strength to keep fighting like that.
Yeah.
Because it would have been easier in a lot of ways to just step back, just accept what the court says and move forward with your life. But she didn't do that. She stays in it. I just think that her staying in it and fighting shows a lot about the amount of love she had for him and how she wanted these answers and she knew there was more to this.
Yes.
And eventually the civil case, it settled for an undisclosed amount. They never published the amount. But I think it's important to say, because people sometimes misunderstand that settlements don't necessarily mean an admission of guilt. It's usually a way to avoid litigation. Right? So these guys are let's just settle. We don't want anybody looking into this too much. Okay? And that's something important to see. They didn't fight back that hard. That's why when you see people who are accused of crazy crimes who settle, it's because maybe they don't want investigators looking into things. So Kathy kept going. And I don't know, that just really sticks with me, because behind all of this, behind the theories and evidence and legal process, there's a woman who lost her husband in a way that's never fully explained, and she just had to live with it. But she did fight. All right, so now we're going to talk through the theories.
I feel like I did that the whole time.
But let's just pull them all together. The version of events that the men give, the intruder theory, right? If we follow that step by step, it makes no sense.
Out.
Right? The home is secured. There's no signs of forced entry. They say they forgot to set the alarm. These men never forgot to set their alarm. Yep. They were very particular.
Your profiling skills was nice there.
Cops say that their spice. Kid. Well, cops say when I was listening to all these interviews with police, their spice cabinet was alphabetized. Okay, these men are incredibly particular. They did not lock the door. But they claim, we must have just forgot. And the door chime went off. There's no signs of forced entry. This person moved through the first floor with tons of expensive things, knickknacks. I mean, these guys had a multi-million-dollar home with really nice things. Didn't steal a thing. This person goes straight upstairs, passes Dylan's room, goes into a guest room where Robert is, and they quickly just start stabbing him. There's no struggle. No one hears any movement, and then the person runs out the door.
They stab him 3 times, 1, 2, 3, and just leave. Bang, 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 and get out.
And they have to climb a 7-foot fence in the back of the house to get away or to get there, and there was a whole like layer of pollen on this fence that was undisturbed.
Wow.
Okay. So when you lay it out like that, it can't happen. It's impossible. The prosecution's theory is the main theory, right? This is the one that the prosecution presented. And this one tries to explain everything in a more structured way. So they say that Robert goes upstairs, he takes a shower, he gets settled into the guest room, and he puts in his night guard. He's ready for bed. But someone, somehow, comes in and injects him with something to incapacitate him. And then from that point, everything starts to kind of line up differently, because now you're looking at a situation where he can't move. He can't fight back. He can't react in a normal way. And then suddenly the lack of defensive wounds makes sense. The lack of struggle makes sense. The way the body is positioned makes sense.
Yeah.
And then you layer in the sexual finding. There's evidence that he ejaculated. And the question becomes, how did this happen if he's not actively participating? Well, that's when you talk about the device found in Dylan's room.
But why would they do that to him?
We don't know the why. And the why in this case...
I don't buy that. They didn't use that machine.
You don't think they used the machine?
What were they trying to save? His sperm? Like what?
Who knows? Russ, in a BDSM situation, people are put through things like that.
Oh,
like
shit.
either
So
restrained,
maybe it was like a game and they were doing their BDSM with him and then did it with him and then they decide to kill him.
So the prosecution's theory is that happened, that they connected this device to him, which caused him to ejaculate. And that answers a lot of questions. So Robert is unable to move or respond in a way he normally would. Stimulation is applied, either electrical or whatever. And things happen that he's not consciously participating in. That's the angle that the prosecution is working from. From there, something goes wrong, whether it's too much sedation or lack of oxygen, loss of consciousness, whatever they're doing with him, it goes too far. So prosecutors don't believe that they intentionally killed him. They believe that he died and then he was stabbed after he died, or stabbed after they believe he was dead. They come up with a cover story and they stab him as part of a cover story.
Could be.
Right?
Could be.
The prosecution also believes that he wasn't stabbed in the bed, that he was stabbed somewhere else, and that they cleaned his body up and then they positioned him in the bed. They also believe that they grabbed the knife from the kitchen and wiped blood on it and pretended that was the murder weapon. And the prosecution says that he was incapacitated with succinylcholine. So succinylcholine was the agent used, and the reason they believe it is because, like I told you earlier, it happens super fast and it metabolizes in the body super fast. So it wouldn't be found on the autopsy, and it would happen so quick, so this would all fit in the timeline. Because remember, we're only working with like 40 minutes. Okay, this is a lot that's supposed to be happening in 40 minutes.
They didn't waste no time doing nothing.
And I get why this comes up. But if you think about this in real life, how would they get succinylcholine? How do you get that drug? It's not even a drug that like we can easily access. It's in a code cart that's locked, so you have to unlock the code cart to get it out, or you have to get it out of a Pyxis machine, which is the machine we use to get our drugs out. Okay? So it's not like this is an easily accessible drug.
Or you buy it somewhere.
Yes, but it's not something that's like sold on the streets.
If you're trying to kill someone, maybe they know people like that.
I mean, maybe they know somebody. But I don't know. One thing that the prosecution brings up of like the way they connect how they could have gotten a hold of this drug that you can only get from a hospital is Joe's brother is a phlebotomist, so he works in a hospital. Joe's brother had a record. Joe's brother wasn't the most stand-up citizen. He also has a history of abuse in relationships. So they use that as a way to say this is how they got this drug. Because
and a phlebotomist is the one that draws your blood, right?
Yes.
All right.
But as someone who works in a hospital, This doesn't make sense because phlebotomists don't have access to drugs in a Pyxis. They could, I guess, technically break into a code cart, but phlebotomists aren't typically involved in codes. They're not part of the code team. So you're not like dealing with this drug as a phlebotomist.
Just take blood. You don't deal with any drugs, right?
Yeah, you're drawing blood. That's what you're doing. So I find that really far-fetched. But
if I had that job, I would tell everyone I was a vampire.
Yeah. I tell my patients I'm a vampire sometimes just to make them laugh. So that is the prosecution's. This is their story. This is their theory, and this is what they presented to the judge at the trial. But I look at something like ketamine, and it fits a little better. If we walk that out the same way, Robert goes upstairs, he showers, and at some point he ingests or is given ketamine, right? Whether he intentionally took ketamine or someone gave him ketamine, he got it. That's what I think. And ketamine disconnects you. You're not fully aware. You're not in control. You're in this kind of dreamlike state. You don't feel pain as easily. And if you take too much ketamine, you become like paralyzed.
What if he paralyzed himself and they found him there? That'd be wild. And then just did whatever they did. It's not likely.
No, it's not likely. And there other theories online circulate that Robert was a part of this. Okay, other people believe Robert possibly could have been on the DL. He could have been a part of this. He planned to come over. He planned to have an encounter.
Because he easily could have went home that night. He doesn't even live far from where he was. It's like he really wanted to go over there.
But that's not true because I told you he texted 2 different people asking to spend the night. Another friend in DC and Joe. And Joe was just the first person to respond. So that kind of pokes a hole in that a little bit. But people do say maybe he was on the down low. He might have been in that environment purposely, and he might have taken a drug purposely, and he might have been in a sexual scenario purposely, and it went wrong. And then these 3 men have a dead body on their hands, and it's their friend who's supposed to be straight, and these are men who are very prominent gay men who 2 of them are like the poster boys for gay marriage. So in order to save our reputation and Robert's reputation, because no one knew he was on the DL, we have to come up with an intruder story, and we need to stab him, and we need to make it look like somebody snuck in.
Listen.
That's a theory that circulates.
Every theory is possible, except that one of those 3 didn't do it.
Mm-hmm.
Like, nobody came in the house. We know one of you 3 did it, so you're all going down for covering it up and being accessory to murder. And then maybe one day one of you will snitch to get a few years off your sentence of who actually did it.
And I think, like, you know, a lot of people are really uncomfortable calling out the fact that it's a possibility that Robert was involved. People don't want to say that because, according to investigators, there was no evidence that he was involved in any other gay sexual relationships. There was no evidence on his computer. They have his laptop. They could have seen if he was looking at gay porn. If you're involved in a sexual relationship with gay men, you're most likely looking at gay porn. And they found none of that on his computer. They found no indications that he was whatsoever involved in any type of relationship with men in college, in high school. They talked to many of his friends, and people don't like to say it, but a lot of people believe it, that maybe he was involved. And that would make the story make a lot more sense, that he was a willing participant. That's why maybe he wasn't sexually assaulted. There are also more extreme theories out there, things involving blood-related practices in BDSM. So there's a whole subculture of people who like to do blood things, who like to mess with blood and have sex, okay? And there are some people who believe that maybe he wasn't killed in the bed. He might have been killed on a tarp or in the shower or in a baby pool, and they were doing this whole blood thing, and then he died. And then there's my theory, okay? My hyperfixation theory. This is what I've come to. This is where I land. And this is not a fully, I can't account for every detail. But this is my theory after being hyper-fixated on this case for weeks. I don't have every answer, but I think that Robert went to that house for exactly the reason that he said he did. I think he went to that house because he wanted to go to sleep, because he had an early meeting in the morning and he had a late meeting that night, and he didn't want to drive home and he didn't want to wake up his wife. So he just decided, I'm going to stay in the city. And I believe it was convenient. It was really close to his office, and he went there to go to sleep. I think he gets there. I think they talk for a little bit. Nothing out of the ordinary. They have a glass of water in the kitchen or whatever, just like the men said they did, and he goes upstairs. I think he showered, and I think he got ready for bed, and then he's in the guest room probably drafting those emails. He then puts his mouth guard in, and that's the part that matters to me, and that's the part that keeps me from thinking he was a willing participant.
She's ready to go to bed.
Because he has a mouth guard in. And if you're going to participate in sex acts, you're not going to do it with your mouth guard in.
Wow.
And that's where I really firmly stand with Robert wasn't part of this as far as planning it or being a willing participant.
Good job analyzing the evidence.
So you're not even about to have a conversation. You're not about to hang out. You're going to go to sleep. And you're especially not going to engage in sex with a mouth guard in. I think that sometime after that, maybe just a matter of a couple minutes, someone comes into his room and he's giving ketamine. I don't know how he's giving ketamine. I think probably the most probable way, the fastest way, would have been injected with it. And I think that's the turning point. I think that everything starts to line up after that, because now he becomes disconnected. He's not fully aware of what's happening. He's not able to respond like he normally would. He's not able to fight anybody. And I think that Dylan, being the dominant, came in and assaulted him. And I think that Joe, being the submissive, was part of it. And I think that Joe and Dylan planned this entire thing.
And Victor's like, what the fuck?
So I found out today, actually, Victor was out of town. He wasn't even supposed to be home.
Oh, shit.
He came home early from a trip.
Oh, man. So they might have had this plan.
So I believe that Dylan and Joe had this planned. I think that their plan was they were going to have Robert become incapacitated. They were going to assault him and use the eSIM on him, because to them, he's not physically restrained, but he's like chemically restrained. Okay. Some people believe he was suffocated because the vessels in his eyes ruptured, which can happen when you're being suffocated.
Why didn't you say these theories earlier and you just let me ramble on like an idiot?
Because I wanted...
This makes sense now.
This is my theory, though. This is just my theory. This isn't necessarily everybody's theory. I told you everybody's theory, too. This is mine.
Yours is better.
I believe that Dylan and Joe came in, they assaulted him, they incapacitated him, and then I believe that he did ejaculate. It was his semen. I believe that they used it for things. I'm not going to go further than that. And then I think it went too far. I think he OD'd from the ketamine, and the men thought that he died, but he wasn't dead. I think at some point he just stops responding, and they probably try to feel a pulse, and his pulse is probably so weak and his breathing is so shallow that they think he's dead, and then they freak out. That's when I think Victor comes down and screams, because he sees either the men have stabbed him or he sees him
hooked
dead
up to a machine
and incapacitated. And I don't believe Victor was part of anything prior to that. I think that was the scream that the neighbor heard. And then I think all of them have to come up quickly with a scenario that Joe, being the lawyer, could say, we're going to say this, we're going to keep it vague enough that it could be believable, and also vague enough that they can't prove the other way. And we're just going to say these couple details and stick with that story and then lawyer up.
Yeah, and he's a lawyer, so he knew what he should and shouldn't say.
Now, when it comes to being stabbed in the bed, I'm unsure about it. There's no room in 40 minutes to engage in incapacitating someone, sexually assaulting someone, and then cleaning up their body. Because some people believe that he was maybe stabbed in another room and then they moved his body to that bed after they cleaned him up in the shower. I don't believe that. I believe that there wasn't enough circulation in his body happening so that when he was stabbed, none of the blood spattered anywhere because his blood wasn't circulating. His heart wasn't pumping.
Wow.
I believe that he had so much internal bleeding because if you're not pumping any blood, it's not going to fly out across the room.
Wow.
If you're not struggling and fighting back, the blood's not going to spatter everywhere.
I think you solved this, Jess. I think it's over.
So it's still a super tight timeline. I still don't know how he was drugged, but I believe he was drugged. I believe that the knife on the nightstand was not the actual weapon. I believe the actual weapon came from the cutlery set in Dylan's room and that those men hid it and it's never been found.
And they were too stupid to take the cutlery set out that was missing a knife.
The knife, yeah. But I keep coming back to the timing because it messes with me. From 11:05 to 11:49, everything I just said happened. The incapacitation, the stimulation, the overdose, the realization, the panic, the cleanup, the staging, the call. That's a lot to happen in that time. So when people say he was cleaned elsewhere and moved, I can't believe that.
That's true.
So even now, I do go back and forth in like, can all of this happen in that window? Because ketamine can take a little bit of time to kick in, like up to 10 minutes.
And if you know you've been drugged, you're not just going to stay there unless they did it to him when he dozed off.
Yeah, he might have been asleep. I mean, so my theory isn't like rock solid, right? This is just my theory.
Nah, it's rock solid. We know what happened. Good job, Jess.
But I think it was a fast situation. It was chaotic. I do believe in the beginning it was planned and then it just went awry.
Something like that will be hard to keep you playing. It's involving people.
Yeah.
People are unpredictable.
I think that's what makes this case so hard for people to walk away from. It's not just that we don't have answers, is that none of the answers we do have fit together perfectly in a way that could really happen. Every version of this story explains something, but then it breaks somewhere else. Every theory gets you closer, but then it leaves you with things you can't explain. Even my theory, which you think is really good, it still is super tight timeline.
Yeah, but you use some science in there.
No matter how you look at it, whether this was intentional, accidental, something that spiraled out of control, you're still left trying to understand what could have happened in that house, in that small window of time that led to a man losing his life and has never been fully explained. And I think that's why this case is so frustrating and it frustrates me so much because it's realistically, until one of them talk, it's never going to be able to be solved.
Well, he was definitely drugged. You figured that out by his heart rate was all the way down, and when he got stabbed, that's why there was less blood. So that, to me, that's a fact now.
And
he was drugged.
Another thing that's interesting, and I didn't mention it, but I need to mention it now. The prosecution says he was drugged with succinylcholine, but people who work in the hospital know that with adults, succinylcholine actually raises your heart rate.
Oh.
Not lowers it in adults.
So
your heart rate doesn't lower, but ketamine can cause your heart rate to lower.
Wow, and so there it goes. Ketamine, done.
So I really believe it was the Special K.
No, 100%. Why wouldn't it be?
Yeah, that's where I'm firm at. I'm firm that it was ketamine.
And we don't know, which one did it. Your theories all sound good, but if all three of you are in on a murder, you don't have to say which one did it, but you're all going to go to jail for hiding it and participating. Like this so how are they free?
They're free because they did a good job covering this up.
The judge was different.
Even though the intruder theory is so ridiculous, they did a good job covering it up.
Maybe they just said, we have to say something, so let's say the most ridiculous thing we could think of. Wasn't me.
Yeah.
Caught him on the counter.
It wasn't me. It's crazy. This whole case is crazy. I've been obsessed. I know this was really long, and I know I got super detailed, but I had to. I had to be detailed. This should have been a 3-parter. You're right.
You snuck 2 episodes in today.
This was a long episode. It should have been 3 parts, but I needed to get this all out.
I need to talk to my union delegate. I'm
And
being
it's crazy.
overworked, underfed. I don't even have a whiskey here.
It's crazy that I didn't even cover all the details. If you guys want to hear all the details, go listen to the 8-part series that The Consult did, the podcast, because that's all the details. Another source, my other main source for this case, was whomurderedrobertwone.com. And it is a blog that 4 men created because they became passionate about this case. These 4 men didn't even know Robert. These men heard about the case because they're all 4 gay men in Washington, D.C. And when they first heard about the indictment, originally, they became obsessed. And they want to find what happened to Robert. And they also felt like they could give good insight into being part of that community, knowing some people that know these people, okay? Their website is incredibly extensive. That's where I found all the documents, the police reports, the autopsy. It's all there. And super duper extensive work. And those men deserve, I don't know, they deserve like an award for what they built. So if you guys are interested in any more information about this case, check those sources out.
I'm going to take your word for it.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I really did try to put myself in the situation and think through it all. All right, everybody. I've driven Russ to go have a drink. I'm so curious to hear all of your opinions. I want to hear all of your thoughts. Please comment on Spotify. Please comment on Instagram. Please comment on Patreon. I want to hear what you guys think. I'm not going to figure it out. No one has figured it out.
I think you did.
But I am totally hyper fixated. So I really want to hear your thoughts. And Russ is about to go have a cocktail.
Russ needs a cocktail.
Russ needs a cocktail after that. All that talking.
I think that's the first time I've ever spoke about myself in third person.
Have a wonderful week. Check us out on Instagram at Wife of Crime Pod, Facebook at Wife of Crime The Crime Family, and Instagram at Wife of Crime Pod. We will check you next time.
Make sure you come in clutch.
Oh yeah, clutchdefenseco.com. Have a wonderful week. Bye.
Have the week you deserve.